Hello guys, and welcome to my channel again. So in this video I'm going to talk about M-Pesa C2B integration. Well, I know that we've been talking about integration for a long time, but then people get confusion when it comes to M-Pesa C2B. So the type of integration that we've done mostly on our channel is called basically known as Lipa and M-Pesa online. Actually, that is where the merchant initiates the payment transaction. Okay, you initiate the payment transaction, and the STK push is going to be sent to the user's phone, and then they enter the PIN. And after entering the PIN, the transaction, if the PIN is correct and the money is correct, the money is in the user's wallet, the transaction is going to be completed. But now C2B is where you display the details, the payment details to the user, the payment steps to the user, where you tell them that go to your M-Pesa, go to Lipa and M-Pesa, go to buy goods or pay bill, and then enter this pay bill number, and then enter amount, and then enter your PIN and confirm. So that kind of payment where they pay that way, that is called C2B, or can be client to business, customer to business, whatever you want to call it. But basically the money is moving from the customer to the business. Now, how do you implement this kind of integration into your application? So where now you want the users to initiate the transaction and not you. So basically, there are few, in fact, this is one of the easiest way of integrating M-Pesa in your application, because there are few things that you need to do, and I'm just going to take you through those things in this video. So, what is M-Pesa C2B integration? So M-Pesa or M-Pesa C2B. So M-Pesa C2B is where you make payment request from client to business, right? Okay, so you can simulate it on a sandbox, that is the developers portal, Safaricom developers portal, sandbox. So this is where the customers are paying to the business, and the customers are the one that initiates the transaction. So you just give them the payment details, and they are going to enter those details those steps, the payment steps and the details that you give them using their phone. And then after that, when payment goes through, you can handle the payment details that are going to be sent to you. And now let's look at the requirements for you to integrate this. M-Pesa C2B. So the first thing you need is your business shortcode. Now let me be clear on this. Business shortcode means that for the case of the till, your business shortcode is the store number. It's not the till number. Okay, it is the store number. That is the business shortcode in the case you are using a till. In case you are using paybill, so your shortcode is going to be the paybill number, right? So the first thing you need the business shortcodes, which is either your store number for the case of the till, or the paybill number if you are using the paybill. Okay, and the second thing you need is you need to register the validation and the confirmation URLs. So let me explain. The validation URLs enables the external validation of the requests. Okay. Now, what is the importance of this? So let's say that before the user pays the money, you want to validate and make sure that they are paying according to the details that you provided, and the money you do this on the validation side. But then basically people don't do that. Basically they just return the true for completion of the transaction. So after just this validation URL needs to be registered. So how it works, you're going to look at it, but then you need to register validation URL and the confirmation URL. So I've just talked about the validation URL is the URL where the request is going to be sent temporarily, and then M-Pesa will be waiting for the response from you. Okay, it will be waiting for the response. So when response comes as success, this is going to continue and complete the transaction, and after completing the transaction, it is going to send the payment details to the confirmation URLs, and after that it's going to send messages to the message to the user who paid that the payment is successful. Okay, so let's go to the next step. Now let's look at the payment process. So the payment process starts when the user pays to your till number or their paybill number. Then after paying, after entering the PIN and confirming, M-Pesa checks if you have enabled external validation. So of course you enable external validation by registering the validation URL and confirmation URL. So if it finds out that you have enabled external validation, it sends request temporarily, the request data temporarily to your validation URL. So this is where you can maybe check the amount. So maybe you wanted the user to pay, the user was paying 500 shillings, but they paid 200. The validation, this validation process where you can check that and either cancel the transaction or complete the transaction. It is upon you. And then M-Pesa will be waiting for you to send them back response. So if response is successful, what happens is that it is going to complete the transaction, and then it is going to send details to the confirmation URL, the payment details. These payment details include the amount in your till or paybill number, or the amount the paybill or stone number is holding after the payment, and then the names of the user, the first name, the last name, the middle name, and the M-Pesa number that they used to pay, and such details. So these details are going to be sent to the confirmation URL, and now here is when you can now take those details and save them to the database. So that is if the validation goes through. But if number one, if validation does not go through, or the validation response delays for the more than the required time or required M-Pesa wait time, what happens is that it is going to use the default action. So when you are registering the confirmation URLs and validation URLs, we have the response which is default. That response is going to be executed in case there is delays from your side, or in case the responder is not sent, right? So the M-Pesa is going to use the default. So the default you can set as cancel or completed. So if it is completed, it is going to automatically complete the transaction. But if it is cancelled, it is going to cancel that transaction if you don't send the response. All right. So I'm just going to implement what I've been talking about in the code so that you can get an overview of how it works. So let me just close this, and then I'm going to the code. So we said that the first thing you need is the validation, all right? So the validation basically is you are the one who writes the code, right? You write the code, the validation code. So as I said, when this request is sent to you temporarily for validation, it needs a URL. So let me just go to API. These are the routes. I'm doing this in Laravel, please. Okay, forgive me if you are not, maybe if you are not familiar with Laravel, but basically these are routes. So for example, this generate access token can just be like in a core PHP application, can be just maybe your domain.com /generate token.php. So basically this is going to be the script that is going to handle any request that comes to that route. So basically that is what I mean by routes. And now here you can see this is for generating the token. Now for you to register the validation and confirmation URLs, you need the token. So let's look at the token method first. So if we go to the M-Pesa controller, you find that we have we have this method here. This method is for generating the token. And you can see, for you to generate the token, you need the consumer key and the consumer secret. So consumer key and consumer secret, you may not see mine because they are in the .env file. So it is very good to store your environmental variables in the .env file, and then you can use, in Laravel you have this helper called env. You can use that to fetch them. Now, basically, token is, you have to send the concatenation. It is a concatenation of consumer key and consumer secret. You can see it is a base 64 encoded concatenation of consumer key and consumer secret. And now this is the URL where you have to send these, credentials, these details, which is base 64 encoded a concatenation of consumer key and consumer secret. So you send to this URL. So basically here we are initializing curl to send the HTTP request to this URL. This is just the place we set the headers. The headers here, you can see authorization import there, the credentials, right? So this one credential are going to go to the headers, and the response is going to respond with the token, right? It's going to respond to us with access token. So every time we call this method, the end product of it is going to be access token, right? So if these details are correct, it is going to send us the access token. The access token is very important for authorization. So we cannot send any request to M-Pesa without the access token. So we need the access token. After having the access token, now we are able to do things like registering the URLs. We are able to do things like initializing SDK push and stuff like that. Now let's focus on the validation. So we said I just said a few minutes ago that validation URL is the URL where M-Pesa sends a request for some time if you enabled external validation. So it sends for some time so that you can check and validate. And now how do you write? So if we go to API, you can see that I've done this validation here. You can see this, the way I said it is a post route and it is STS validation, right? You can see. Let me just open Postman. So as I open Postman, you can see that this is the validation URL. So this validation URL, every time this is the validation URL and this is the confirmation URL, and they have already been registered. So how were they registered, or how do you register them? But before looking at registration, let me just look at their function. So if we go to M-Pesa control, I've been talking about this M-Pesa validation. This is the method responsible for validation. Now you can see that basically here we define the result code, and also we define the description. So this is upon use, but the result code should be 0, because 0 means that there is no error or it's successful. And then description is accepted validation request, or the request has been accepted. Now this is just like default, but then you can write the logic here to do your validation or check amount and everything. If amount is maybe lower than what you expected, you can cancel the transaction if you want, or you can allow the transaction to go through. And now this method should not confuse you. Basically this method is just a returns response. I could have just taken all these and put them in this method here, but I just to use another different method. But this method is not related to M-Pesa, just our method that is going to, we pass there the result code and then description, and what it does, it initializes new response, it adds their headers, and then it sets the content as whatever we had done here. Okay, you can see the result code here, the result or just JSON encoded result code and result description, and after that it returns response. So this one, don't care about this. Basically you should know that you just return response here. Okay, just return response here. In the response you have to set there the headers as application stroke JSON, and then char set should be UTF-8, right? Then after that you just return that response. You can return response here. I don't have to do this, but this is just a better way of coding where I use another method to return that response. I use another method to set the headers, set content, then return the response. So you just know that basically this M-Pesa validation, what it does, just return success. It is, you will always return success, right? In our case, but then you can write your logic whether you want to cancel or whether you want to accept or complete the transaction. All right. So every time M-Pesa sends validation request to this URL, it is always going to be a return a success. Now let's look at the very important step of registering URLs, right? That is very important. These URLs are the URL that M-Pesa is going to set as M-Pesa is going to set as the confirmation and then validation URL. So also what you need to know is that once you set these URLs, it is not very good. You cannot change them unless you write to API team. They will change it for you. Now I said this shortcode here is your store number. If you are using till, this shortcode should be your store number. But if you are using paybill, this shortcode should be your paybill number, right? Okay, I'm sorry, let's start from the top. We start with initializing curl, okay, to send the HTTP request. And then we set the URL that we need to send that request. And you can see that these URLs are usually provided with M-Pesa, by M-Pesa. So you can see api.safaricom.co.ke. This is the URL that you have to send this request for these details or these URLs to be registered. Now, after that, you can see that the header, you have to pass there the token. So you can see that we are passing there the authorization type. We invoke the invoking word is the bearer, but then we concatenate it with the token. So remember this method, generate token. It is going to generate a new token based on our consumer key and consumer secret. So that token is going to be sent in the header. So when Safaricom, M-Pesa reads the header and finds that that token originated from them or was generated by them, it is going to validate that request and allow it to go through to register these URLs. That is in case we have no other error. So let's look at the field that you have to send. You can see that it is just a JSON encoded array of a few parameters. The first one is the shortcode. The shortcode, we say that if you are using till, it should be your store number, but if you are using paybill, it should be your paybill number. And then you have the response type. So this response type is set as the default action. So in case the request is not received from your validation URL, it is going to do this action. So you can set as completed or cancelled. Completed, it is going to always complete those transactions. Anytime there is an issue or there are delays, it is going to always complete the transaction. So you find it that it is very good to set as completed. And then now you set your confirmation URL and then the validation URL. Again, we said that the confirmation URL is where after payment has gone through successfully, it is going to send the payment detail to this URL, and then you can handle those details like saving them to the database or do whatever you want to do with them. And then the validation URL, we said that this is the URL where M-Pesa temporarily sends, it sends there for a short time, send there the payment details so that you can validate them and return them response. Then if that response delays, it is going to do the default action, which is usually set here. And I'll advise that you set as completed so that it will always complete the payment, okay? In case of other things, you can sort them out. Now, after having these details, how do you send them? So remember that you have this in Laravel. I'm using Laravel. You have this, okay? You have this method here, and now we just define a route for registering URL, which is just this route. So to register them is very easy. You just go to your Postman or any other. Just open your Postman, and then on your Postman, what you want to do, just open a new tab and select post method, and then paste your URL there. You can register both from the local host or from your URL. Okay, just copy that. Right, let me just copy that and paste it here. Now you can see this URL is the same as this URL here. So if I send the request to this URL, basically this method is going to be invoked, the M-Pesa register URLs, and it is going to register these URLs, right? So so you can just do that, and then so what happens is that after if we go to Postman and click on send here, what is going to happen is that these URLs, they are going to be registered if we don't have any other error. Okay, so make sure that in these URLs we don't have anything called M-Pesa. All right, so like if I add here, let's say I add API/M-Pesa there, this is not going to be registered. They are not going to be registered because I've used M-Pesa. M-Pesa should not be allowed in your URL. So just make sure that you don't include any name called M-Pesa or any word called M-Pesa in your URLs. All right, so after that, now you are set. Now after doing that, every time a user pays and the transaction goes through successfully, what is going to happen is that a request or your payment details is going to be sent to this confirmation URL, and you have to handle that using a method. And you can see that I'm handling that using this M-Pesa confirmation method here, and the same method is set here. So you can see this is the confirmation URL, and you can see the method I'm using is M-Pesa confirmation. As you can see, M-Pesa confirmation, if you go to the controller, this is the M-Pesa confirmation method. Basically, it gets the content there, it gets the payment detail that is sent to it, and then it JSON decodes it, basically so that I can just convert it to an object that I can just use, get the details. So, and then after that, you can see I basically get these details and save them to the payments table. Now, remember that this table, you have to create it. You have to create that table. And that table, when you are creating it, you have to include these details that I usually send. I said that M-Pesa will send to you transaction type, then transaction ID, transaction time, transaction amount, business chat code, bill reference number, invoice number. All these details will be sent to this confirmation URL, and you only have to save them to the database. Now, let's look at the migration, how it looks like. You can see this migration, you have the first name, the first name of the user who paid, middle name, the middle name of the user who paid, and then the last name, his or her last name. Then you have the transaction type, whether it is a customer buy goods online or customer pay goods online. So if a pay bill online, so if it is pay bill number, if you're using pay bill number, of course you know that it is going to be customer pay bill online, but if it is till number, it is going to be customer buy goods online. Then now the bill reference number, the invoice at the third party, and then this is basically the phone number and the amount they paid, and then the organization balance. And basically that is the balance in your till. Okay, so basically that is it. Now maybe I shall do it practically. Now guys, allow me to do the testing here. Right, I've opened a table in my database. You can see this is just a test database, of course, but it's online. I can do real time. I can do it practical so that you can see on a live application. So I've just transferred that code to one of the some just test applications. You can see that that code is here. This is the code that handles confirmation. So every time the user pays to my till number, this method is going to handle the payment detail that M-Pesa is going to send to the confirmation URL. Now, I've opened this here. This is the M-Pesa payments table, where you can see that based on this code, what happens is that when the payment details come to this URL, this method takes all those payments and saves them to the table called M-Pesa payments, and that table is this one here. So you can see that here we have the 3 test transactions, the transaction that we've just done for testing purposes. Now I want to do the third. If I refresh here, I'll just see that there are basically 3. There are basically 3. But I want to do the third just to show you how it works. So what I'm going to do is to go to my M-Pesa. I'm just doing it, and then we are going to refresh this once I've received the confirmation method. Now, out of confirming, I'm going to wait for the message, and after the message comes, I'm going to refresh. And yes, I've received the message, so meaning that the transaction should have been saved. It needs to have been saved. So if I refresh here, you should get that as the 4th row. And sure enough, you can see we have the 4th row, and you can see the customer payment and all the details have been saved, including the amount is 2 shillings there. So basically that is it. That is all about M-Pesa C2B integration. And in case you have any questions, let me know in the comments section. And also, if you like my content, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much.